Cinematic, what does that mean? I remember 20 years ago, I was editing some SD footage, and no matter how far I cranked the contrast or pushed the saturation, I could not get it to look like a Michael Bay movie, and I had no idea why. Now, I understand a little more. We've got way better digital cameras, and we've got all these tutorials on YouTube, and they're teaching us how to make our footage look cinematic, and you should go watch them all because they have so much to teach us. I think they're missing one thing. So instead of starting with the question of, do I have the right gear, footage, or presets, what if we started with the question of how? How am I going to transport my viewers out of their everyday, boring reality into the enchanted world of the story? How am I going to help them dream? Cinema uses the language of dreams. One helpful way of thinking about this is dream layers. Dream layers is this phrase I've been using to describe all the layers of production that are needed, that you stack up in order to do this reality transportation from everyday reality into the enchanted world of the story. And dream layers are all the things. But each dream layer is not some random box to check off. They're all charged with sometimes hundreds of years of symbol and history. So, a certain lens could evoke an era or a mood, or your lighting and blocking could be reminiscent of a Renaissance painting. This is the exciting and daunting and incredibly expensive work of filmmaking, right? Because you have to get enough people collaborating together with all of their expertise to stack up enough of these dream layers. If you're an indie filmmaker or just getting started, you might be like, how am I ever gonna have the resources that I need to do this reality transformation to stack enough of these dream layers you're talking about? As I go through just a handful of them, I'll try to bring up examples of how for 100 years, filmmakers have been finding workarounds or alternative ways of stacking these dream layers. I know these are not popular topics on filmmaker YouTube, but story and performance are probably the most powerful dream layers. A great performer can pull the audience into the world of their story with no other tools. Think of a stand-up comedian. So if we got all of the camera dudes on YouTube together with some theater kids, we might have an indie film revolution. Lighting. Lighting is royalty among dream layers. If you can get your lighting right, your scene becomes a dream. But what if you don't have the resources to do that? Well, you can think about when in our everyday reality does it most approach a dream? When does it become most surreal? And we have golden hour, early morning or late at night, when the sun's low in the sky and the atmosphere filters out some of the blue light and reduces the intensity, makes it softer. It's kind of like it's taking the chaos of reality and dialing it in. It's like that artistic decision has already been made for you. So what other environments also have lighting that feels a bit surreal just as it is? Frame rate's a fun one to talk about. I hear some people be like, well, we only use 24 frames a second because that's a historical precedent set in the early days of filmmaking. And I would respond, yes, filmmaking is always referencing past art forms and its own history. And so if you can use 24 frames a second, then you're evoking the whole history of cinema. Beyond that, I think there's maybe a scientific or at least an experiential aspect where 24 frames a second is a bit slower than what our eyes can perceive. So maybe there's a bit less data our brains are processing. So our brains might have to interpolate or fill in the missing data. Maybe we're dreaming a little bit metaphorically. A look at animated films like Spider-Verse, for example, they drop the frame rate even more to 12, sometimes 6 frames a second for artistic effect. It's great for action sequences, and who knows, maybe our brain is having to imagine a bit of what might be there, and that's adding to kind of the surrealistic experience of the film. The film look. Why is everybody still trying to emulate film? It's an outdated format. But half of YouTube is halation tutorials. So I think this dream layer theory might help explain this phenomenon. It's more than nostalgia. Film comes baked in with 5 or 6 dream layers. You've got beautiful skin tones. You've got really nice transitions between darks and light and things like highlight roll off. You've got kind of this je ne sais quoi dimensionality to it, almost like an oil painting. You've got grain, you've got halation, you've got the softness. So it comes a bit surreal right out of the box, where digital is very clinical and you have to do a lot to it. You have to add multiple dream layers to get it into a more surreal space. Film comes with it baked in. At this point, you might be like, dude, I can't afford any of the things you're talking about. I just have an iPhone. That's okay. You have some options. Where cinema often transports people into a surreal world of a dream, you could also transport them into a nightmare. You know, instead of dialing down the chaos of reality, you could turn it up. And tools like an iPhone or a camcorder or whatever are great at that. If you're trying to make your iPhone footage look like a Nolan film, you might be frustrated. But if you're telling a story that really lends itself to the chaotic energy of an iPhone, then you've found the perfect tool. So this leads us to genre and framework. Not many of us can afford to have the dream layers necessary to make like a Christopher Nolan film or a Paul Thomas Anderson film. If we try to do that, it's probably not going to have enough of them stacked up to draw people into its world. But if we're able to find other frameworks or genres, then we are going to be able to accomplish that transformative process. So when we were working on the Rites of Man, I knew I wanted to shoot film. I wanted all those beautiful dream layers and the surrealism that comes from film, but I couldn't afford traditional coverage. So I decided to craft the story in an homage to like a 1960s documentary. And I think it's gorgeous and it works well. And I think it draws you into its story, but it's a different film than like a blockbuster. It's a different genre. It's a different framework. And, you know, like horror is a different framework, and you can get away with a lot of things in horror that you couldn't get away with in a drama. And so knowing your genre and framework is going to help you choose the right dream layers. If it's consistent to the world and to the particular story you're telling, it's going to draw people in. And they're going to feel the fingerprint of like a crazy Don Quixote that has something important to say. And when that happens, I think you've made something that's cinematic. That's what cinematic means to me. So, thank you.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.